Hi, and welcome to OTH Sports View. I'm Times Herald sports editor Chuck Pollock. And it's been an interesting week for St. Bonaventure basketball. The men's team suffered 2 losses, one of them not a good one. The second one could have been a disaster, but as it turned out, maybe not so bad. The women, though, keep rolling. They've now won 16 in a row, 2 really good victories. And as usual, I have my suspects here who cover those teams. On my right, J.P. Butler in his 8th year covering the Bona men, and in his initial season covering the Bona women is Jeff Madigan. And we'll talk first with J.P. Butler about the Bonnies this week. J.P., kind of a tough week for the Bonnies. It started off last Saturday with a difficult loss at Duquesne, mostly because the defense let them down. Then came an absolute potential disaster earlier this week against Dayton. Bona's down 31 points, 13 minutes to play, and you say, oh my, this is one of those losses that sticks for the rest of the season. They made an inspired comeback, got it down to 6, actually could have had a possession, did have a possession, that could have cut it to 1 with 10 seconds left. How do you, they hadn't had a week like this all season. How do you assess maybe the fallout from that?
Well, the biggest thing is I think they certainly kind of came back down to earth a little bit. They were 4-0 going into that Duquesne game, really kind of the talk of the league at that point, really kind of the surprise of the league at that point. They go into these 2 games, the Duquesne game, even that one was not necessarily an easy game. Duquesne is a middle of the pack A-10 team. They're pretty good at home, so it wasn't as if that was really a hugely surprising loss. But it came at a tough time because then after that you're starting this really difficult stretch here where it is going to be hard to get some wins and keep that momentum going. And it started with that Dayton game on Tuesday. And as you said, it goes from being this just total disaster. Here they're in a position where this is their first real chance to now take that next step further, improving themselves. They had the foundation for that with the 4-0 start and the wins over Rhode Island and Davidson. Right. But now here's that next step against a team, in Dayton, who I think might be the best in the conference, could very well be a top 25 here sooner rather than later. And they basically fall flat on their faces for the first 27 minutes of that game. As we saw, though, they make the comeback that they do. And so that kind of leaves me, wondering what are we going to see now going forward, especially against some of these really good teams. VCU on Saturday, Richmond a week after that, St. Joe's a couple of days after that. Are they going to be the team that found itself by a bunch in a hurry, was really overwhelmed by a team that had the talent that Dayton had, or are they going to be the team that did what they did in the second half? They were 20 points better against Dayton, against a really good team in the second half. Marcus Posley and Jalen Adams finally got going. Is it going to be a situation where those guys can get going earlier against a good team and they can really bring it for a full 40 minutes, or are they going to really struggle here? And I think right now that's kind of still up in the air, and we'll have a better idea on Saturday when they play VCU.
One of the things that stands out, the 2 names you mentioned, Mark Schmidt is very metered about complimenting his players. But he has said for the last 2 weeks that in his mind, Marcus Posley, Jalen Adams, 2 best guards in the league. And that in itself gets your attention. But what really got mine was after Dayton won that game, hung on to win that game, a game that the Bonnies, I think, thought they had a pretty good shot at winning, Archie Miller went out of his way to point out that those are 2 of the best guards in the country, and they've got a guy coming off the bench who gives them something else. And we keep hearing this, but I think there's value to it. If you have 2 really good guards, you can be in any game.
That's the difference, I think, between the start that they've gotten off to this year and even the potential that's still there for the rest of this season, as opposed to maybe a few others, is the fact that they do have those 2 guys and, really 3 guys when Dion is playing as well as he is. And then, if you get Denzel Gregor and Nelson Caputo adding to that, when you have that in place, you do have a chance in a lot of these games. And so I still think there are a lot of wins out there for them to get. Will they do it? I'm not sure at this point. They certainly have to weather this really difficult stretch first before they can get to that point. But that is the difference. I mean, right now, this was very stunning to me. This was pointed out to me in the post game after the interviews had wound down. Those two guards right now, Posley and Adams, are averaging 42 points a game in conference play. That is an astounding number. And yes, they need to continue to get it from Deion Wright and a guy like Greg and that whole thing to sort of be complete. But to have two guys that are playing as well as they are and giving you 42 points a game in conference play right now, there can't be another backcourt in the nation, I would imagine, that is providing that to their teams right now. And if they can continue to do that, and certainly we saw what they're capable in the second half of that game. If they can do that sooner in games and continue to just have that ability to score and keep their team in it, I think Bona will be okay. It's just a matter of, can they continue to do it against really talented teams and what kind of help they'll get along the way.
One of the things that stood out to me in the Dayton game, and we realize it's not as if the A-10 is a conference that has a glut of big men, but that team is long and athletic. And it seems to me that the Bonnies were a bit exposed in the fact that without a real presence at big man, problematic maybe as the road goes down toward the end of the season.
Well, I mean, I think Dayton has the best personnel in the league. So a lot of teams are going to have problems with what they present. It wouldn't be a surprise to me if this was another Dayton team that made a run in the NCAA tournament, made it to the Sweet 16 again this year. And they're going to, Bona is going to certainly face that in some of these teams that they play. VCU is another one on Saturday. St. Joe's is much better. Richmond, their record doesn't necessarily indicate it, but they have a lot of talent too. And so I'm curious to see what even this Bona team that, high scoring capability can do against a team that has that kind of talent and that kind of size. They've been hurt on the boards, as we've seen, especially over the last couple of weeks in conference play here, and that definitely can play a factor. But at the same time, they're also going to get into their stretches where they play some of these teams that have struggled a little bit, and we saw even at the beginning of the year what Bona can do, to those teams. They get the 2 double-digit road wins over UMass and George Mason. They've got St. Louis twice this season, and they're still young and really rebuilding. They've got LaSalle, they've got UMass again, they've got Duquesne here again. So there's certainly going to be an opportunity to get those wins still, but it's not going to be easy. As Schmidt says, they've got to play, they got to be bringing it. When they do, we see what can happen in the second half of that Dayton game. But there are teams that certainly I think will be able to expose some of their weaknesses on the boards and defensively. And if they don't have guys like Posley and Adams really, really kind of stepping up in those situations, then they'll lose some games too.
It was kind of a tough week for the Bona men, not so for the Bona women, including one really impressive road victory, and we'll talk to Jeff Madigan next.
Right.
Jeff, as the season has gone along, gotten used to long winning streaks. It's now up to 16, but this past week was interesting. Nice home win against George Mason, but an astonishing win, in my view, especially the way it was accomplished against Dayton on the road. Really, that seems to set them up for kind of an interesting finish.
It does. It certainly does. That's a big win yesterday over a Dayton team that's a little down this year because of injuries. If Dayton was at full strength, I don't know if the Bonnies win yesterday. They lost 2 really, really good players from last year's Elite 8 team, and then 2 of the consistent starters that were supposed to do a lot of work for them this year are injured. So Dayton's a little down this year, and the record would indicate that. Now it's a really good 8-9 basketball team, 1-5 in the conference, and I hate to say the cliche, but anytime you win on the road, it's certainly a good win, no matter how you do it.
One of the things that occurred to me last night during the game at Dayton, in a way, what's happening with Dayton this year, personnel absences notwithstanding, they kind of remind me of the Bonnies last year, where there was talent there, where there was every reason to expect a tournament quality team. It didn't happen, and this is one of those games last night that Dayton lost that the Bonnies kind of would lose last year.
It certainly was. And if you don't have the players and they're not working well and they're not working, how they should be, together, things happen like that. And the way the Bonnies played defense yesterday, and it was certainly showed in last night's game, the way they played defense, they really wore Dayton down. And by the fourth quarter, Dayton only scored 7 points in the fourth quarter, and 3 of them came on an early three. So they only allowed 4 points to Dayton over the last, I want to say, 8.5 minutes, while also putting up 19 points of their own, which allowed them to come back and win that game. And they were down 13 in the first half, and they were down by 10 points with I want to say 4 minutes left, 4.5 minutes left, something right there. And you don't win games on the road down 10 with 4 minutes left if you're not doing something right, both offensively and defensively.
One of the stats you had in your story that really jumped out to me was they got to 54, they're leading the game,
Yep.
and they never scored again.
Yep. And I didn't even recognize that until after the game was over. And Coach Crowley, when I talked to him, said he didn't recognize it either. But to hold a team like Dayton scoreless over the last 4.5 minutes of the game while scoring 15 points of your own in the atmosphere that it was. Now, there was a large Bona contingent there last night, and that was certainly evident on both the radio broadcast and the TV broadcast. But to win at UD Arena, which is a tough place to play no matter who you're playing, whether it's the NCAA tournament first 4 games or if you're playing the Dayton men's team there, which our men will do next month. But it's to win a game like that at UD Arena. The chips are against you. You're on the road. Even though you were supposed to win, just looking at records alone, that's a remarkable feat, and it could certainly take them, to the next 2 months.
We haven't seen George Washington yet, and our assumption is that is quote unquote the elite team in the Atlantic 10.
Right.
But back in 2012, when the Bonnies won 31-4 and made it to the Sweet 16,
Yep.
they had that 18-game win streak. What was really impressive was they went 14-0 in the Atlantic 10.
Right.
And that particular year, it occurs to me that there was a lot of parity in the league, but you kind of get the idea Bona could maybe do that kind of thing again, with the exception of what happens when they play GW. But it's maybe they picked a perfect time to have this kind of season.
Well, what helps when they play GW in St. Louis, who's 4th place right now, is that they're both here. So they'll get George Washington, who comes here, and St. Louis will play here. Now Duquesne, they have a home and home with. So right there, those are the 4 games you're looking at that schedule going, okay, these are the games you're going to have to prove yourself. And look at that, and that starts this Saturday at Duquesne. And the only other game on the schedule that worries me a little bit was the game at VCU on February 3rd, because that's not an easy road trip. Now VCU's a little down this year. They've lost some games in the conference that I didn't expect them to lose, but they're 2-4 in the conference, but they had a remarkable non-conference year. They went to Arizona State and beat Arizona State, but they've had some odd losses in conference play, VCU. But going back to what you said before, George Washington right now looks like the best team in the conference because they handled Duquesne at Duquesne last Sunday by 18 points.
This will be kind of an interesting yardstick game. I'm thinking one of the, in my mind, law of unintended consequences is what you take. In this case, the Bonnies win at Dayton.
Right.
I think emotionally and mentally and self-confidence-wise, a win like that is huge. And personally, I feel a lot better about them going into this game now after coming off a win of that magnitude.
Right, and I'm thinking when they're down by 13 in the first half, they're down 24-11. I'm thinking maybe in the past, maybe they could have said, and the next time out, well, this game was fun. Let's get on to Duquesne on Saturday. But they didn't do that, and they kept clawing and fighting their way into the game. Nyla Reeder, 1 for 15 from the field. That's I can't believe she shot that poorly, and I guarantee she doesn't do it again. Katie Healy was in foul trouble the whole game. She had a huge first half. Really kept the team in the game early, and late she had some shots as well. And then Miranda Drummond was 6 for 13 from 3-point range, and that was key right there. And for them to win the way they did, it certainly gives them the momentum and the confidence to go into Duquesne and beat Duquesne, who hasn't played since that beatdown that GW put on them on last Sunday.
We've talked about Dayton, but there were 2 games last week, and the other game was interesting. Home game, George Mason. It was kind of a take care of business game, but those are the kinds of games that Jim hopes to get out of his team as the season goes on.
Yeah, you want to win your home games, and the Bonnies have done a very good job of that so far. They haven't lost at the Riley Center, and they'll be back here next Wednesday against St. Joseph's. They have a good possibility of going into that GW game. I want to say it's February 17, 20, I forget the date, but at Perfect at home, and GW could very well be undefeated in the league, and so could Bona. So that game right there is your marquee matchup, GW and Bona. I forget the date off the top of my head. It's a Saturday, so it wouldn't be the 14th, Valentine's Day, I'm not sure, but it's right somewhere mid-February. That's going to be a very good yardstick game right there as well.
That's today's edition of OTH Sports View. Tune in next week.